Hey, I'm Deidre Detterman, host of the Do It My Way podcast, where we empower women business owners and CEOs to do business on their terms with no regrets, hesitation, or fear. I'm obsessed with all things marketing. I started my career in television, and I remember sitting in countless meetings, listening to executives talk about things that needed to change, but they never did. I was always thinking, what if we did it my way? Once I became an entrepreneur and I started living life on my terms, working the hours I want to work, making the money I want to make, I started to feel success. I was finally in control of my destiny. I hope you will join me on this journey discovering how you can do it your way. Welcome to the Do It My Way podcast. You're not going to want to miss this one. I have Teresa Forehand coming on. She went from PA to digital creator and has over 100,000 followers creating her 20-minute meals. You don't want to miss this. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk today.
I'm so excited to have you here. You know, we just recently met.
Yes.
So we were doing D2 Branding, was reaching out to influencers in town, and you were one of the ones. And I met you at a grand opening, and I just loved your story.
Well, thank you.
And I think it's so unique how you've shown up online and just the transitions you've had in life. So you go to medical school, right? Become a PA, love your career. Then you start to have kids, and then something shifts, which I think happens for a lot of moms.
Yeah.
You know, maybe this isn't as important as I thought it was, you know, when I first started. So take me to that time, what your career was like as a PA.
Okay.
And then what happened that kind of shifted your mindset of maybe there's something else?
So being a PA was the end-all be-all goal for me forever. I told my husband, I was like, do not propose to me in PA school, like studying school. All I want to do is learn and do well and practice medicine. And so I did that. And I very much like a plan. So I'm like, this is what I'm going to do. This is what's coming next. My mom we have 3 siblings. So there's 4 of us. She worked full time, raising all 4 of us. And so I always saw myself as a working mom. I love the challenge. I love just diving into different pieces of who I am. And then I had kids, and it was challenging. I went back to work. I had a really challenging delivery with my first. Went back to work about 10 weeks postpartum. And I think every mom can remember going back to work after that first baby.
It's tough.
It's so hard. And everybody tells you it's just going to get easier. It's just going to get easier, which it does in some ways. I think one of the hardest things for me was feeling like, I'm not sure if this is what I want anymore. And that's a really hard thing to admit when you are a type A personality and you're very independent and you've spent a lot of money and time getting an education.
Medical school bills.
Yeah. And
loans.
I saw my parents work the same job their entire life. You didn't change careers. You didn't change paths. So that didn't even seem like an option in my mind. And so I am also somebody who's like, well, if I have an idea, sure, let's try it, you know? And so kind of started getting into the online space, talking about wellness because I'm a PA and I have a degree in nutrition. So I love that aspect of encouraging people. And especially in that postpartum journey, it's a whole new world of wellness and just connecting with other moms. And I found so much joy in just being authentic and vulnerable and not having to act like this is easy and this is perfect and just being myself. And to be honest, it was one of those things when I first started doing anything online. I mean, I would not film anything without makeup on.
Oh, yeah.
All this done. And it was interesting because the more I did it, the more confident I became just being who I was.
Yeah.
And so I really saw that kind of development in myself. And then I had another kid and another kid.
Yeah.
And so it really evolved and changed over the last 6 years of deciding what I want and being okay with that. A lot of my identity lied within my career, in all transparency. And so that was very hard for me to walk away from, a lot more just because of the respect I got from other people.
Right.
And people understand what a PA is. When you tell them you're a digital creator, they're like,
yeah.
Okay. And I'm like,
doesn't sound like a real job.
Right. And so I had to be really honest with what makes me happy and what I want versus what does everybody else want for me or what does everybody else think of me. And that's a hard thing to overcome as a woman. But I will say there is a lot that goes into doing things when you're a CEO or an entrepreneur that people do not see. But I think when you find so much joy and purpose in the freedom that you've created, it's very motivating.
That's key. You know, if your child had a field trip or something was going on and you have patients you've got to see, you're not just leaving the office.
Exactly. I mean, there is a day when my first son had the flu. My husband had a lot more flexibility in work at this time. And I mean, he's just bawling, "Mommy, stay home." And I had a half day at the office. It really was not a day that couldn't have been rescheduled, but I worked with a physician who did not have children, and she did not understand that just frustration, you know, of having
it's hard.
Either way, I felt like I was losing. If I don't show up for my patients, I'm not being a good PA, but I'm not showing up for my son, I'm not being a good mom. And so that was hard, you know, those defining moments are really when things are hard or what I think about and what I'm able to do now. Yeah. And that's what pushes me, you know?
That's great. Well, and you treat your online creation as a business, right? I mean, you have a business that you're running, which is the difference.
Yeah, I do. I think I always go big and I'm like, why do I do this to myself sometimes? But a lot of that is so much of just how my mom is. And, you know, it just that achievement personality, which sometimes is good and sometimes it's not. But
I'm the same. I have the same personality type.
And
have
so
you ever
like,
done the Enneagram?
Oh yeah. Okay. I'm a 3.
You're 3. Me too.
Like, if I'm going to do this, I got to do it well. And I have to treat it like a job. I mean, walking away from medicine, it was, you know, 50% of our household income. And so I couldn't just leave and stay home.
Right.
That wasn't an option. So I needed to figure out a way. First off, I had a lot of student loan debt from PA school. So my first goal was paying that off, replacing my income that I made as a PA doing this. And then it took a lot more for me to even walk away from it still, just because there was so much of that identity I held within medicine and just saying, okay, I'm going to trust myself to do this, you know, which is scary.
I mean, the fact that you can replace your income being an online creator, and tell me this, because I grew up in the blogger world, right? So we did blogging, and then it became, you know, influencer, and now is it creator? Is that the best way?
Yes,
for me
I
to
think
say
digital creator.
Digital creator. Okay.
You know, and it's funny because a lot of
right.
times people ask, they're like, if you're applying for a campaign and like, are you an influencer or digital creator? I'm like, I don't really understand the difference.
What is the difference?
I think digital creator is more video creation, creating user generated content versus like, I'm just going to share a picture.
I'm going to how cute I am on the beach.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And I'm like, I would so much rather give you a recipe than have to model. So.
That's great. Okay, let's talk about exercise.
Okay.
Because I know exercise is a big part of your life and a big part of stress relief. Yeah. It's probably my number one stress reliever. I've always like, if something's going on in my life, I lean into exercise, which some people think I'm crazy, but I'm like, there's definitely worse things you could like lean into than that. But that was really kind of the first time for you showing up online as a creator, putting content out there was through exercise. Walk me through that.
Yeah, which it's like, it's so funny because I was in like the most vulnerable state of motherhood, which is like I had just had a baby. And, you know, the online world was so different. Even he's almost 7. He's going to be 7 on Monday. 7 years ago, because we didn't have Instagram stories, you know, everything was an in-feed post, and the editing is comical now to look back on. But it was just like, okay, I'm just going to turn my camera around here and figure out how to do this. And here we go. And all my videos had my baby in them because I worked full time. So I was like, I'm going to have to work out at home. I went from someone who loved going to the gym to having that realization that 40 hours away from a baby is a lot of time. I had to have exercise because I'm so much like you as well. It's a huge stress reliever, and it just is like the core of who I am and what I believe. And I was always somebody that was like, I've got to practice what I preach and what I talk to my patients about. And so started exercising at home after having my first baby and just took everybody along.
But people love that.
Yeah.
Because also, if you think about it, it was probably like the worst shape of your life.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right after baby, you're not
I don't have any pictures before that. I'm like, remember when I used to have muscles?
Abs and all the things. Yeah.
3 C-sections
which you
later,
have them
you
now
know?
because I've seen. But you know, it's like probably the most vulnerable time. I mean, I remember thinking in life, probably like the ugliest I've felt is right after having a baby. And you don't care because you have this beautiful baby.
You don't,
but
and you
you're
look
like,
at pictures like,
oh gosh,
really
my hair is going crazy. Your body's doing crazy things. So to show up online for the first time, like, I'm going to do workouts.
Yeah.
You know, and everyone related to you because how many people are out there in that same position, either just had a baby or not thrilled with, you know, their body where it is right there at that moment in life. And people don't have time to go to the gym and be fancy. It's
I was struggling a lot mentally postpartum, you know, which was also a newsflash to me. I went a week past my due date, and I remember my OB goes, she has 4 kids. She's, Teresa, I just want you to know, sometimes the postpartum period can be harder than pregnancy. I was like, oh no, definitely not. I am ready to not be pregnant. And then I was like, whoa.
Right.
What is this?
And your story, I mean, you were 36 hours in labor.
36 hours in labor.
I've never even heard of that.
And
That's insane.
I went in on a Thursday. I was induced because I was a week past my due date. Went on a Thursday and labored all day Friday. Friday night, my doctor's like, I'm not going to be able to deliver you. Like, her kids had
the shift's over.
A special event at school.
Oh my
and so the other
goodness.
doctor comes in. He's like, what do you need to know? What do I need to know about you? And I was like, you just need to know I'm not going to have a C-section. And he's like, okay. 12 hours later, I'm like, this baby has to come out.
Get it out.
And I always say that was God's way of teaching me that it's not always up to me anymore.
True.
And it's
So
not always
true.
my decision. And I had a 10-pound baby boy. So I was like,
Oh,
well,
my goodness.
who knew you were 10 pounds? I probably wouldn't have pushed so long.
Yeah.
But
And then recovery was
recovery was really tough. I ended up getting a really bad infection because I labored so long and I pushed so long. I had a lot of nerve damage. It was just like, what happened? Like, you see these people go in the hospital and come out and have a baby and everybody's perfect and beautiful. And it just was not that story for me. And that was a lot for me. I think I mourned that for a long time. Just labor wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And
you you watch the movies and it's this beautiful
I had a lot of
picture.
shame and guilt over a C-section, which now that I've had 3, I'm like, why? But again, it was just...
Society kind of does that.
It does,
Yes.
especially when you're somebody who's active and healthy and...
You're like, why would I need a C-section?
Yeah, and my mom had 4 kids naturally. And so again, it was just... took me on that journey of accepting things that might not go my way. And it's my decision on how I react and, react to it and my
So
perspective
true.
on it versus it is what it is. So.
Yep, that's so true. That's a great perspective. I think, motherhood. I think that's it from here until the end of time. So I have a 19 and a 20-year-old, and things don't go as planned, right? You think when they're little, okay, I can kind of control, what's going on and all that, but as you keep going, it's not your plan. It's
they become their own person, which you want them to, but
yes.
I have good plans.
Yeah,
too.
right. Exactly.
Right?
I laugh because our personalities are very similar. So I understand what you were going through with that. So let's talk about entrepreneurship because I didn't set out to be an entrepreneur. I was working the corporate ladder, making the money, doing the thing, traveling. And I ended up having my son 12 weeks early. So out of nowhere, I have a 2-year-old at home and I deliver at 27 weeks. And so just like you, I was by the book. The plan was going this way. I worked out every day. I ate everything I was supposed to eat. I read all the books and did it just like that. And for whatever reason, my body goes into labor. Okay. So I knew there's no way that I could go and do this corporate job. I couldn't travel. There wasn't a boss out there that was going to let me off work every other day to take my son to therapy and see these doctors and all the things we had to do. So I had to control my own destiny and become an entrepreneur. So looking back now, I wouldn't change it. I'm like, I should have done this path all along. It's, you calling your own shots, which is, our personality type loves. So what about you? Do you think you'll ever go and get back into medical practice? And
I will say I love the connection I had with my patients, but I love feeling like I can be a present mom and still bring income to our family, and have the ability to make the decisions and not be micromanaged by a big corporation. And I think that's,
So true.
we're looking back, that's how I felt. And for so long, I wouldn't even call myself an entrepreneur. I think I had so much identity crisis with that because I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. You know what I mean? And you realize every entrepreneur is like, I don't know what I'm doing. We're just figuring it out as we go.
Right.
And taking the chance. And I just saw medicine as this safe job, right? And
very well respected.
Very well respected. You have a 401k. And after some other life circumstances that happened in our family over the last couple of years, which we'll talk about, I realized that job could be gone tomorrow. That job could be gone tomorrow. And I can only do that job if I'm sitting in a room with a patient. That's the only way for me to make income doing that. So what happens if I can't do that? And so that's what really just gave me the confidence to say, well, if I'm going to bet on anybody, I'm going to bet on myself.
That's so true. That's great. Well, take me back to February 2022. And I know this was probably something hard for you to talk about. You were getting ready to quit your job. You'd made plans. You had friends and family. You're going to do a big party. It was going to be your launch.
Yeah.
Leave the PA job. And your husband ends up having a ski accident with a severe brain injury.
Yeah.
So share with me just that time in your life.
So that December prior, I had tried to go part-time at work. And, I think it was those ways I was just trying to ease my way out. because I was still holding on to that so much. And some circumstances happened and I was pregnant again. I had no paid maternity leave. And it was like, why am I doing this? And my dad had come over to watch my daughter because she was sick. And my dad is an accountant and he's very frugal. And so he looked at me, he said, why do you still do this? And so much of me, I think, felt like, okay, you're giving me permission to go do something else. And it's just what I needed to kind of have that confidence, because my husband was always like, you'll do it, you'll be great. I'm like, okay.
Right.
And so I put my notice in. Medicine, it's really common to have 30, 60, 90 day notice. I had a 30-day notice. They asked me to stay 60, so I agreed. And so my last day was supposed to be February 9th. I had not told the world, social media world, that I was leaving my job, just because I wanted to be professional and tasteful. And so that Sunday prior, I got a phone call. My husband was in Colorado on a ski trip with his friends. I was 16 weeks pregnant. Our house was for sale, so I was staying at my parents' house that weekend because we had open house. And I got a phone call from one of his friends that he had been in an accident. And so I ended up flying to Denver, and we lived there for 2 months.
Oh my goodness.
And he had a severe traumatic brain injury. So everything, again, I'm a very faith-oriented person. And I always tell God, I'm like, I just need a direct sign. And my mom's like, quit praying like that, Teresa. Because I was like, we were struggling with, should we sell our house? Right. Should we do these things? And it was kind of just this huge, obvious sign that no, that's not the plan. And it changed everything in our lives, and it changed who we both are, and it changed our family and our priorities and our perspective. And it's been long enough now, and through a lot of therapy and time, that I'm able to see the positives of it. But by far the most challenging experience.
I mean,
I've been through.
it was 2 years ago.
2 years ago. So we spent 2 months in Denver. And then
with kids or without kids?
Without kids. So that was probably the hardest part.
Yes.
I mean,
but they couldn't be there.
They couldn't be there. And brain injuries are so complex that it was so hard being separated from family, but so much of his recovery has to be rest. So it was better to just not have people that could come. And I gave him all of my attention. My whole goal was just to get him healthy and strong and home. And
you're a PA, so
and I'm a
it's
PA,
natural
and I had worked in actually long-term care and skilled nursing facilities, which is really what he was in. That was my job up until then. And so I was able to give him, I mean, it's a hard thing once you have kids and a spouse, and your spouse comes first, but when you have kids in there, that's hard.
It is really hard.
That's hard. And so I had to choose him, and
Right.
I'm so glad I did. He would have done the same for me. And he told me the other day, he goes, I know that God put me through this because I couldn't have handled it like you did. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've just
Right.
never thought of it like that.
Right.
And so it was a long 2 months. And I was pregnant with our third, which was really the least of my worries at that
Right,
time. I was like,
right.
it's my third kid.
Right.
We'll be fine. So we came back home, and then he was home for work for 6 months. So that first year was kind of a blur. We just hit the 2-year mark. So still a lot of healing and a lot of
Right.
changes, especially when you add a third kid into the mix and going back to work.
It's a lot.
I would say one of the hardest things about this experience is it changes you so much. And his doctors told us this. And when you're in the hospital, you're in this protected bubble, and then you come home and all the things that pull at you before pull at you again, all the things that want to drain your attention or your time that really aren't worth it do. And it's just tempting to go back to that. And you have to kind of check yourself and say, this doesn't matter. This
Right.
isn't a big deal.
Your whole perspective on life will be changed forever.
Yeah, it will. And that's by far the greatest gift that's come from it is just the perspective and how you're able to see things.
I hear you talk about gratitude a lot, and thinking of every day, being grateful. You're talking about on the way over here. I need to be grateful that I have this job and that what you're doing, but it gives you a huge perspective shift.
Does.
And it's funny, anytime I have something happen in life, I think back to my son. He was 2 pounds, 9 ounces. And he had all kinds of tubes coming out of him in an incubator. I couldn't hold him. And I think of that moment and I think this is not a big deal.
Exactly.
It's really not a big deal.
It isn't a big deal.
And he survived, and he's a healthy, happy 19-year-old. And I'm like, you know what? I think God gives you those moments in life sometimes just to give you that perspective and that gratitude.
Well, especially when you're someone with our personalities where you are very achievement driven.
Yes.
And you like to do well. And sometimes it can be hard to turn that off. And so a lot of times I think we do have to go through these big life experiences to kind of ground us and make us remember what's important.
So your husband's working now.
He's working now.
And I've seen him working out with you. You guys do workouts
He ran
together.
a marathon. I'm like, I'll never run a
gosh.
marathon, but you do that and I'll cheer you on.
Well, and talk about someone that probably is never going to take his health for granted.
Yeah.
I mean, once you go through something health related, your health is such a huge priority.
Yeah.
So that's amazing.
Yeah,
I love
so he's
hearing
doing
that.
well. Our plan is to go back to Craig. That's the hospital he was at in the fall. I'm like, I'm not going to Colorado in the winter again.
Yes. You need to show them. They will be so excited with the progress.
He's the pitcher for our son's baseball team. And I'm like, just watching him throw a baseball.
My gosh.
I'm like, this is so much. Like, I know everybody else, like, he's throwing to 7-year-olds. And I'm like, but he can throw a ball and it goes straight.
It's
like,
huge.
So just those little things like that you're just able to like really appreciate.
Yep. We went to the NICU every year and took donuts. So we would take him to the nurses and be like, here's our son, like, look at him, and they have a million kids that come through there, but he was there for 3 months and several of the nurses remembered him. And, I'm like, he's a happy, healthy,
Well, when you are in healthcare, very rarely do you get to see that side
the
of
good
it.
Side.
And
right.
so it's always so fun when you can, know you made a difference. So.
Right. Okay, so how do you balance everything?
Okay.
I mean, 3 kids,
3 kids.
A husband who, needed a lot of your attention. Really, it was kind of probably like having 4 kids.
Yeah, it was,
at
for
the
sure.
time.
Yeah.
And one being a newborn. Your business that you're running, you're healthy, you stay in shape, you work out every day, healthy meals. I mean, you're checking all the boxes. Yeah. So how do you balance all of that?
Well, I like checklists.
Yeah.
It was a few years ago. I remember there was kind of this narrative on social media, and it's like everybody was posting. It was like, balance is a joke, and balance isn't real, and balance is opposing forces. So if you're trying to balance things, it's never going to work. And I was like, I get that to an extent, but I kind of disagree. I think balance is just different for everybody. And so if you're trying to compare your balance to my balance, it's going to look different. And so you're going to feel like it's never possible. And so someone gave me advice once, I can't remember who it was. And it was just like, your time should reflect what you really say is important to you. So if my faith and my family and, being present, but like if I'm spending 60 hours a week working and I'm away from them, or if I say my health is important, but I'm not exercising or, taking care of myself, there is going to be this opposition. And so for me, so much of it was really being honest with what's important to me. And things that changed over the last few years was certainly my social life, and things that I just had to say no to because I did get up really early and work or exercise, and I couldn't be out till 10 at night. It didn't make me the mom I wanted to be the next day. And I didn't think it was fair to my kids. And so having to really be honest and say no to stuff, which is hard.
It is.
And I love to socialize, but doesn't mean I don't do that, but I had to prioritize other things first. And so that's how I feel like I live in a state of balance. And of course you have times where you don't feel like that. That first year, I would not say balance was there, but
survival.
It was more survival for sure. But that has always helped me feel like, okay, if today, look at my time, if I did a time audit and I look at my values, are we in alignment? And if we're not, what can I change? And for a long time, work was what took all my time. And I felt like, well, I don't have a choice. This is just my job, right? And I think so many of us fall into that trap of saying, well, I don't have a choice, but you do. It's not going to be an easy transition to change to something else. But in reality, my son is 7 and I'm able to be home so much more than I ever was. So yeah, I hustled for 4 or 5 years. Right. And I gave up a lot of things and nobody saw that, they just see the pretty shiny things on social media. But I would never change it. So.
Well, that's, I think you've done an incredible job and putting your family first and, being able to have a business on the side. You're really kind of showing moms out there you can do both.
Yeah, because we're really, really good at doing hard things.
And doing multiple things.
You can. I know. I'm like, we can do it. Just let us do it. And you just have to have that drive and passion and accountability to just make it happen.
Yep. Okay, let's talk about your niche.
Okay.
Because 20-minute meals.
Yeah.
And your stuff looks beautiful.
Thank
I
you.
mean, it's like your food looks just so amazing. So how did you transition from kind of the exercise, and I know you still throw in some exercise stuff, but really to this 20-minute meals? Because I will say, you know, when I talk to people about they want to show up and be a creator and start putting stuff out there online, you can't be everything to everybody.
You can't. And that's hard.
Yeah.
It takes time to really niche down. And it sounds simple when you do the little exercises and you're like, who am I talking to?
Right.
But then putting that into practice is different. And I think part of niching down, the hard part is also saying, who really am I?
Right.
Because sometimes you don't know. What do I like to do? I'm a mom. I don't know. I work out and I eat.
Right.
I run kids around. And so, you know, I saw this transition in my audience, and it was, while yes, exercise was still a struggle, I thought about what was one of the hardest things for me as a working parent. And it was nighttime. It wasn't breakfast.
Dinner.
It wasn't lunches. It was dinner. I'm like, I'm tired. I'm checked out. I was so guilty of saving 5 million Pinterest recipes that were too complicated.
Right.
And just
ingredients this
making
long.
it hard. And so someone else gave me the advice once that was like, you are best suited to help the person you once were. And so it's just like, okay, I have the time to do this now. So how can I make this easier for other people? Because I know there's other moms. I mean, my parents prioritized family dinner, even though they both worked full time. Doesn't mean every night it happened or that every night it was a gourmet meal, but it was really about spending time together. And they really, really prioritized that. Even if it's 10 or 15 minutes and we're all arguing, you know, it's like we had family dinner. And as a kid, you're like, I'm not thinking about this. And as an adult, you just understand how impactful that was. And so, of course, we've been through phases of life where when we had one kid, it's like we fed him something, we put him to bed, and then my husband and I ate, you know? And so it's transitioned. But, you know, we have kids now that are old enough to understand sitting down, eating together, having that example of what are mom and dad eating, you know?
And healthy.
Healthy. And that we all eat the same foods. Mom's not going to eat something different, you know? And looking at that as an opportunity to teach our kids and also an opportunity to spend time together. And so I will always have that helper gene in me, you know? And so just being able to really, I mean, it's so funny because when I'm creating these reels, I'll set a timer and I'm like, okay, if I got home from work right now and had a really bad day, like how realistic is it?
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking about,
Yes.
I try to always think about the person on the other side of the screen and like, what are their struggles? What are they going through? Like, can they take this meal apart if they have a really picky eater, and just try to put myself in their shoes.
Well, I love watching your little son will be like grabbing your leg.
Yes.
And here you are in your cute little outfit, getting your food going, and he's just right there.
Mom!
Or you might give him a little, you know, project or something
Yeah.
to do and to try to feel like they're helping
Yeah.
you, which is so great.
Yeah. There's so many cool inventions nowadays to help your kids be in the kitchen. And of course, people are like, isn't it stressful? I'm like, it is to an extent, but it also teaches me to be flexible. And I need that. So, you know, it's a good teaching lesson for me too.
And you do the whole grocery list, right?
Yes.
So you can get your grocery list. So
Grocery
you're
list.
not having to think.
Right. Like grocery list, recipes, menu. Try to keep it simple. 5 dinners, because I'm like, you can have leftovers one night and you can go to grandma and grandpa's house for dinner on Sunday.
Yes.
So,
you know, you wouldn't have had the success that you've had if you just were on there cooking. Let's just say you're generic cooking, whatever. It's not going to get the traction. Yeah. You had a niche. You're going after busy working moms who you were, right? Showing up as them, making everything easy. I mean, you're really...
And being yourself. I think that's really hard sometimes in the online space, is just... you can get sucked into wanting to be somebody else because you're watching all these other people, and everybody's got their own, you know, special, unique touch. And sometimes you can lose sight of what is mine, you know, and you morph into somebody else and you're like, that's just not authentic. And so if you can just be yourself, I think it makes which sounds simple.
No, that's a great advice. Because it's also your story.
Yeah,
right?
it is.
Your story, your skills, your knowledge, your expertise, that's personal brand that you're putting out there online. You know, that's what we coach on, personal branding. And it is, people are like, well, someone's already doing, you know, consulting in the music industry, let's just say. And I'm like, but they don't have your story. They don't have your background. They don't have your skills. Right? So putting all that together is where the success lies. Which I love. So, well, good. Okay. Posting on social media, because probably the number one thing that I get asked, or D2 branding, is what the heck do I post on my social media? So how do you think of new ideas every day, show up? You're multiple times a day.
Yeah.
Do you have a planning session? Do you have a content calendar? Like, walk
I have
me
both.
through.
So, and I can tell when I'm in the right headspace where just the creativity is flowing. And we probably all have those times where we know, okay, this is my best time of the day. Mine is the morning for sure. And I can just rattle off ideas. And so it's just kind of like that brain dumping session, just writing all of those things down and then thinking about what is the cohesiveness and consistency I'm sharing across the month and where can I plug these things in, and what are my goals, or if I'm going to be doing a campaign talking about this, how can I kind of lead up to that so it doesn't seem like something I'm just throwing in there, and it seems authentic because I want it to be.
People are paying you,
right?
So sometimes you got to squeeze that in.
Yeah, and so I want it to do well for them, and so I really try to keep it cohesive and think about my brand. With everything I'm sharing, what I'm wearing, what does my house look like? Someone was like, my hairdresser said something. I was like, I'm just not the hot mess mom. I feel like that sometimes, but that just isn't really my personality, right? And so that's okay. But it would be confusing to people if that's what I was sharing.
Right.
So I'm like, I do love dresses.
Yeah, you always have the cutest dresses.
Right?
Your house looks
that
so
makes
cute.
me happy. So not that it's always clean or perfect by any means, but
that's part of your appeal. I think
it
goes with the brand.
Yeah.
It's like, she's dressed up. Yeah. She's got a cute dress on. You're kind of thinking, where'd she get the dress? And then I want to cook this meal. And
so I think, when you're on social media for your business, you have to think about those things.
Right.
What kind of person am I representing? How is this speaking to the person that I want to buy my product? How can I give them value? I always try to give before I ask people for something. So it's like giving meal plans, giving recipes, because it will always come back, and I think sometimes that feels scary. Like, I don't want to give too much away.
Right.
But my experience is just like, the more you give and you're happy to share, it all works out.
They all share for you.
Yeah,
everyone's sharing your content.
You don't necessarily know how it's going to work out, but it'll work out. And so I think that applies to any business is how can I teach people? How can I give them value? How can I give them resources? No matter what your company is, you have some type of valuable asset, and something you can teach people.
Did you have a mentor, because I know obviously medical school, PA, this is nothing like that. You didn't learn anything in medical school or college that is preparing you, right?
Yeah.
So was there a mentor or someone that linked arms with you that said, you know what, Teresa, I'm going to help you out to become an influencer and to get online and be a creator?
No.
Right.
But I will say, I am one of those people that I'm like, you have to take responsibility for what you need to learn. And I think PA school did teach me that, is like, if I'm not comfortable talking about heart disease, I need to study heart disease. So if I'm not comfortable or I'm not in the right mindset or headspace to do this, how can I get better at that? And so I'm really big on personal development, listening to podcasts, because it was a whole new space. Like, this is so different than what I did at work, right? And so how can I get better at that? And it's like, there is so many amazing books and resources, and mindset is so important when you're an entrepreneur, and personal development and learning and pushing and just continually taking in that information. And so I think I've had a lot of mentors that don't know they're my mentor because I just, read their books or listen to their podcast. But no, I never had anybody that was one-on-one. I think it's a space that would be awesome for that, because sometimes it does feel like a black hole of like, what are people doing? What are you really doing behind the scenes to make this successful for you? And it can be hard to figure out.
Well, I think there's also a little bit of that competitiveness, right?
Yeah.
I've seen it and being in different rooms with a lot of creators, and it's kind of like, I'm not sharing my secrets because it took me, there is a little bit more in that industry than I think, some other.
And I think it's all about, are you kind of having that scarcity mindset, because there's always going to be more business out there. And the other part of that is I think people want to brainstorm with people on their level, so if I have worked really hard to have 150,000 followers, I want to be in the room with other people with 150,000 followers, versus maybe somebody with 10,000 followers, which is just a totally different, work day and what you're doing and what that looks like. And so I think that's part of it too, is just, okay, there's always more out there for everybody, but you also want to be around people that make you kind of level up.
So I think we might have just come up with your next business idea, because you would make an amazing mentor.
Well, thank you.
Think about teaching creators that want, people that want to get in the space and start. And there is a need for that.
I would agree.
I think online education type.
And I think the world of social media, which I love, has transitioned so much over this last year, of posting a pretty picture and being like, look at my family and look at us.
We're perfect.
you need to teach us something and you need to give us some value. And it doesn't have to be this perfect curated post. We want to see more real life. And I do think that's been a huge transition, which I like, because a pretty picture is great. And we all like to have a pretty picture, but it's nice to get to know people below the surface and be like, okay, if I'm going to be on social media, I want to learn and make myself better, And
I think always looking where everyone's always perfect. You're like, I don't relate to that.
It isn't.
When do they have no makeup on and they've had a bad day?
Yeah.
And I mean, I watched one of your videos where it was the 2-year anniversary of your husband having the accident, and, no makeup on, very vulnerable, crying. It's real life.
It is
what
real
you had
life.
gone through. And I feel like I know you and you're my friend now, right?
Yeah.
I want to pray for you in that moment.
Thank
I
you.
want to, and that's the emotional connection that you can do online, through social media, that it is a differentiator.
Yeah. And I think that is the amazing side about social media, where there can be so many negatives. It's like, okay, if I'm going to be in this space, I want to be somebody who connects with people. I don't want to just be here to be like, look at me. I want to connect with people genuinely. I talked yesterday a little bit on my social media. Someone was like, how do you handle trauma after trauma, which our house caught on fire last week. So it's been a bizarre few weeks, but I was just really open with the fact that I've done a lot of therapy. I'm on Zoloft. I had to start Zoloft after my 3rd pregnancy. I struggle a lot postpartum, and I was really struggling after Cody's accident. And that was really hard for me, especially I got a prescription for anxiety medication in PA school, and I never took it because I was just stubborn. And I just had to be honest with myself and what I needed. And I knew I was doing the exercise and the meditation and all these other things, and it wasn't working. And so it's amazing how many people yesterday were like, I have thought about it. And I'm like, it's your decision, of course. But I will tell you, I feel more like myself than I have in years, And so sometimes you just have to tell people the good and the bad and the ugly, and just
that's
connect
why
with
you
them.
have an amazing engagement.
Yeah.
I mean, your following is great, but your engagement is huge.
Yeah.
You've got people commenting and pouring out and all of that, and that's when know you're doing something right.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
So, and the reality is there are people on the other side. You might be the only connection that they have.
Yeah.
Maybe it is a new mom that has to stay home with their baby because of special needs or whatever is going on, and you are their connection. And you created this amazing community.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you.
Okay, so the number one question, and it's probably taboo to ask, but I'm always like, and do you make money?
Yeah.
People show up online, you can put all the things out there, but can you actually make a living doing that?
You can. But if you want to, you have to treat it like a business. If you treat it like a hobby, it'll pay like a hobby. If you treat it like a business, it'll pay like a business. And so I think a big thing I had to overcome in the social media space is saying like, I am worth this, because I'm not really assertive. I'm like, oh, that sounds good. I just want everybody to be happy. And so that's not my strong point. So like we talked about before we started recording, that's something I outsource. I have a manager who talks all those conversations for me, because I know that's not my strong point, and I get uncomfortable and awkward about money and what I should charge. And so I have a manager that does that. I have a virtual assistant who does a lot of my graphics and helps me. I mean, I have all the recipes and stuff, but she takes all the time putting those into Canva for me, because there is only so much time you have in the day, right? So I do spend money on it. And I think that's the part of it too, is you do have to spend money. But for me, spending money also motivates me to make money. So if you want it to be a business, you got to show up. I mean, you have to create the calendar. You have to have the consistency. You have to treat it that way if you want it to pay that way.
So true. That's great advice, because I think people try to dabble and they're not making money and they're trying to figure out, what do I need to do? You've got to you jumped in feet first, and you also had to, the life circumstances that were going on. You were like, I have to make money.
Yeah.
This is not a choice.
Yeah.
This has got to work. Yeah. And so I love that. So you have a manager.
I have a manager
that handles all the kind of sales stuff, which I think if they're calling you anyway, you seem more big time if they're calling someone else.
Yeah. And it's,
like,
she does all my emails for me. So it's just like one less inbox I have to be in, because
you're the talent too.
I do
You're the
all
face.
my time. All of me is on my Instagram. So that's all me. Mm-hmm. And so she does my inbox, all my campaign negotiations, when are things due? And then I have a virtual assistant who I've worked with for years that I love. Like she keeps my head on straight. She's like, you need to do this today. I'm like, I do need to do that.
And how did you find her?
So she was actually a virtual assistant for a friend of mine. And when Cody had his accident, I needed an assistant, and she just jumped in and like feet first and just started doing stuff for me. So last year when I did my apron launch, I did a line of matching aprons for Christmas. Her mom is actually who made them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it was a fairly small production. Of course, I had the idea in September. And so everyone's like, you can't do this. I'm like, well, now I want to do it because she told me I can't do it. And her mom's retired and has sewed for years. So she sewed all the aprons and they're all handmade. And so they feel like family. But
that's great. Well, and I think you saying you show up on your social media, because a lot of people will hire, I'm going to have somebody, post different stuff for me. It doesn't work well.
Yeah, I would agree.
People can see through that it's not you, it's not your voice, it's not your personality.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's where you kind of have to guard that piece of it. What can you outsource in other areas where I know a lot of people want to outsource to social media? Because it's hard. But it's just like anything, the more you do it, you get better at it, you get more comfortable with it. And you're never going to get better at it if you don't do it. So
what is your number one piece of advice for somebody that's out there that's like, you know what, I'm thinking about creating a brand online. Yeah. What do I do?
I think first off, what's your why? Why do you want to do it? What are you thinking about sharing or teaching? And how much time am I really willing to dedicate to this? That doesn't mean scrolling and looking for inspiration, but what am I willing to put into this? And what do I want out of it? Where do I see this in a year? And it's not that you need to know everything, because so much of this is just starting and learning as you go, but you do need to think through it a little bit and realize it's going to take time and you're going to have to learn new things. Are you willing to learn new things? How to make a reel, how to edit, what's better lighting, there's just so many aspects that go into it. And so I think if you are motivated and willing to learn and driven, you can absolutely do it.
So what's next for Teresa Forehand?
That's a good question. This year, let's see. My words, I always do a vision board. So I'm a big visualizer, and those have helped me tremendously over the last few years. And I couldn't choose one word for the year. So a few of my words for this year were like transform, elevate, surrender, which mean a lot of different things. My business has transformed over the last year. So really just continuing to improve my skills and get better at those things and figure out other ways to help people and create more ideas. I mean, the dinners just came to me one night, and so it's kind of fun to think, I don't know what I'm going to think of the rest of the year and where it's going to go. And so really focusing my time there. And then of course I always have personal goals with our family and stuff. But I've thought about doing other launches. I did aprons last year and loved it. So it is one of those things. I told my husband, I was like, I have all these ideas, but I do only have so much time. And I want to focus on a few things and doing a great job than just spreading myself thin, doing 10 things, which is, again, really hard for my personality. I read a book called 10X is Easier Than 2X. It's a really great book. It's written by a psychologist. And it's a book I had to read a couple times through for it to really sink in. And it's really, really helpful. And so I read that at the beginning of the year and I was like, okay, I've got to really choose one or two things this year and just put my heart in that. And so for me, that was my social media and getting better at doing it, because it's always ever evolving and changing. And
you definitely have to stay on top of the technology. You do. Something is hot.
You figure it out and it's going to change tomorrow.
That's so true. I love that. Yeah. Well, you are an inspiration to so many people. I just love your story. And I love the fact that you went to medical school, changed paths. Now you're living your own life. Yeah. You're controlling your destiny, raising these beautiful babies and all of that. So thank you for sharing today and for being on the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me. I always want to say, if women look at each other and say, if she can do this, I can do it too. It's one of the best things you can tell yourself, because it just opens the doors of possibility.
Yes. Women empowering other women. That's what we're all about.
If we can do it, they can do it.
Yep. You're a perfect example of that.
Well, thank you.
And thank you all for joining us for the Do It My Way podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Do It My Way podcast. If you like this episode, please remember to share with your friends and make sure to let me know who you'd like me to interview next. We'll see you next time.